Hey everybody, to start off this episode, I want you to think about the brands that you're most passionate about. Maybe it's a sports team, maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's a restaurant you go to all the time. What do all of these brands have in common? I'll give you a second to think about it. But it's that they trigger a strong emotional response in you. And this phenomenon is something that startups and entrepreneurs can really learn a lot from. Which is why today I've brought in a very special guest, Rachel Barrett, the Director of Marketing at Shorecrest Preparatory School, to chat about how her team connects the emotional dots for Shorecrest students, families, teachers, and community members. Over her 8+ years at Shorecrest, Rachel has learned a ton of lessons to share with us today about how to tap into the right emotional responses for a diverse audience. Rachel, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Travis. Thanks for having me.
To start the show, I actually have a clip pulled up that we're going to watch together here. It's a TikTok that I found, and I think it's going to be a fun one to kick off our conversation on storytelling.
This is Pixar storytelling rule number 5. Why must you tell this story? What's the burning belief within you that your story feeds off of? That's the heart of it. This is how you stay motivated, people. This is how you avoid burnout. If you can stay focused on the core message of your book and why you need to tell it and need to put it out into the world, that's incredibly motivating. And if you can refer back to that whenever you're hitting writer's block or getting discouraged, I've personally found that to be hugely motivating. I highly, highly recommend answering these questions on a sticky note and putting it right in the middle of your wall.
So I love that, first of all, that she was playing like the remixed version of the Up theme music from the Pixar movie. So just a little quick plug there. But what are some of your thoughts on what she said about that?
Well, I love this, and I wholeheartedly agree with her point. I think finding your why is always the best way to start with storytelling. And at Shorecrest, our why is always our mission. Mm-hmm. So we tie everything back to our mission. And I also loved her use of sticky notes. I think visual reminders, sticky notes, organization that you can see and touch is really critical for getting organized when you're telling a great story.
One of my favorite speakers on this is Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, I love Simon Sinek.
I read one of his books. I think it was called Find Your Why. Or something like that.
Start with why, I think.
Yeah, there it is. I listened to it on audiobook. But anyway, I think it's a good reminder. And stories need to be mission or value driven. I think this is where a lot of folks go wrong sometimes, where they talk too much about like the specific features or products that they're selling, right? And they don't get at the heart of the story. They don't get at what she's talking about. And I just feel like if you can blend together the why and sprinkle in, like a little bit of the features or functions.
Yeah.
It's like the chef's kiss of marketing.
Totally. The balance is so important because what people think they want, they think they're shopping kind of rationally and based on features and benefits and costs. And in reality, that's not how humans make decisions. We're just very emotional beings.
Yes. Well said. So this jumps perfectly into our first segment, which is what does emotionally, compelling content look like, and how do you create it? So full disclosure for those who are wondering how I got in touch with Rachel, my wife is a teacher at Shorecrest, where Rachel works. And I said to my wife, what are 2 pieces of content that Rachel and her team have put out that really spoke to you, that you remember? And she brought up 2 things. First of all, it was a video that I think your team recently created. I do apologize for my audience that's listening to this audio. I do encourage you to go check out the full experience on video and YouTube. But we'll only play about 30 seconds of it. You'll hear some nice music while we watch it. want to make everybody have to watch the whole video with us, but I think this does give us a really good glimpse. First of all, it's adorable. For those, again, that are just listening, the video does encapsulate what the experiential school is at Shorecrest, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
Yep.
So they're adorable and they're playing on the playground, they're painting, they're working with their hands, they're in the classroom. You get to see them experiencing it at their eye level in a lot of those shots. So well done. I loved it. But what about this video works so well?
Well, I love this video too, Travis. It's one of my favorites. Shorecrest is pre-K through 12, so we start at 3, we go all the way through 12th grade. We have over 1,000 students. So our experiential school, the entry point, is always one of our primary marketing focuses because it's the main entry point to the school. And for this video in particular, it's a great example of show, don't tell. We don't say a single word in 1 minute and 4 seconds, but we tell the school's whole story. You'll see our program in the experiential school is all about building a strong foundation for learning. It's all about that starting growth of a young student. And you see that symbolically and literally throughout that video. You see B-roll of students tending plants in the gardens. They're literally climbing new heights on the climbing wall on the playground. You see tight shots of little feet standing strong, and you feel that energy of happy, engaged kids, dedicated, lovely teachers like your wife, and they're working hands-on with the kids. And I think what's really great about this is nothing is staged. All that B-roll is what happens every day. And of course, we plan to make sure we're not too disruptive when we're in there getting content, but it is, that's what you're going to see when you go for a tour, when you're a family visiting your kids. It's just very authentic.
Yeah. So that leads me to my next question, which is, what are some of the emotions you think that, whether it was intentional or it was just a natural byproduct, that you evoked with a video like this?
Emotions. I think, this piece was intended initially to be a piece for prospective families, just a little teaser to learn about the program. And we wanted them to be able to see their children there. We wanted them to say, I want my kid to have that experience. I want my kid to be engaged, happy, loved, and learning like these kids are. And I think that has been the effect of it, absolutely, in the series. And that video actually won a Tampa Bay Telly Award for its great production.
Right on.
And those, I think you asked if those emotions matter, and absolutely. We're creating content for families who are making choices about their kids' schooling, especially when their kids are that young. They're looking, some families tour when, they're still expecting, the baby's not even here yet. And it's such a big choice for families. It's so different than making a choice of like a tangible product you're going to buy, consume, and can change your mind next time. Our program is 15 years, so a lot of families are making a very long-term choice.
I think one of the things that stood out to me was this notion that you probably didn't even intentionally come up with internally at Shorecrest, which is the Shorecrest lifer, right?
Yep.
I live here in the Tampa Bay community. When I tell people that my wife works there, like, oh, my kid was a lifer, right? So this idea of being there for 15 years or more is wild to me. Like, that is like a strong selling point. But I do think the video does evoke some of these emotions of like authenticity, things I heard you say, like they're happy, but they're challenged, right? They're climbing new heights. So I love this. I think there's a lot for marketers to learn from this video in and of itself. You said it great. We have 1 minute and 4 seconds of footage that won an award, and we didn't say a single word. Nor do I even know if there was text that was written out on the video.
No.
Show, don't tell. That's amazing. I love it.
Awesome. I do too.
All right. So that leads me into my next question, which is, let's talk about, every marketer wants this, and sometimes it's hard to hammer down, but what type of framework do you and your team and Shorecrest agency partners that you guys are working with, what framework are you using when you create these videos?
Well, we always start with our mission, kind of going back to our little TikTok review. And then we think about the key talking points for whatever particular program, person, department that we want to share with our audience. And we think about our particular audience. So, mission, what, and who. And then for the experiential school, for this video in particular, we really wanted to focus on the environment, the people, and this idea of growth and joy, because those are key components of our program. I think we do a lot of planning on the marketing end, but then there's a lot of conversation with the people who do the day-to-day with kids. It's talking with teachers, it's talking with families, and really gathering those stories from these real hands-on places versus us as the marketers kind of laying it on them.
Yeah.
So a great example from this video is in an interview. We typically do our interviews before we would film B-roll. So we talk to our parents, our students, our teachers, that kind of thing. And then it's the things that bubble up from them that help us figure out our shot list. And a good example from this is, one of our teachers was talking about how you don't see anything store-bought or store-made on the walls in the classrooms in the experiential school. It's all student-created art. It's all from nature. It's all natural. And the kids had done their own calendar that they, found the numbers, they cut the pieces, they painted, and that's what they use every day when they're learning the days of the week and their numbers. And so as she was telling that story, that helped us find that perfect visual that I think you can see start to finish in that video.
I think it's brilliant that you start with these interviews and you kind of figure out what themes are popping up organically from these conversations and the questions that they're answering. And then you're like, okay, let's use those themes and let's make sure they're aligned with our mission, are aligned with our values, and then let's film some cool B-roll and win win an award with some video footage of it. That's pretty neat to me. So the second piece of content that again, going back to my wife, I was like, here are two things that I really loved. And one of the ones that she mentioned was the annual magazine that y'all put out, which is really cool. Print is not dead, and a lot of folks do think it is. And I know as a marketer, print can be a struggle. It can be challenging, and it has makes me take a deep breath when I think about it. But it lands, and when it does, it works. So let's take a quick look. We've got here pulled up a digital version of the Shorecrest magazine. First up, love that I see the cover shot here. For those that are just listening, is a few children riding tricycles around a beautiful campus layout. And it looks like, is it like cropped with like an old...
Yeah, so it's actually, the cover, I love this cover. So this was our last magazine before we celebrate our centennial. The school's turning 100 years in 2023, which is a big deal for any school, but particularly in Florida, that's huge. Yeah. We're certainly one of the oldest in Florida, definitely the oldest on the West Coast. But this image is really kind of overlaying a photo from the 1920s, to a photo from the 2020s. So, but the kids are doing the same thing. So we've got black and white in the background, color in the front. I think it's a really interesting use of imagery, a really creative approach to show the connection to the past, but also looking to the future.
And we can scroll through this just briefly. And if there's anything you want to call out or you're like, hey, I want to specifically look at this one, we can, kind of look at it together. I know that I worked in higher ed for a couple of years, and we had our campus lookbook, right, when I was working at Eckerd, and it was huge for folks. They really wanted it. They wanted to look at it when it was out on the table at college fairs, when they would come and visit. And again, I know that putting these together is a lot of work, but it really does pay off, especially when the mission-driven storytelling is apparent throughout it. So what do you think is working so well, or why is someone like my wife, so excited when we get this in the mail?
Well, I think that's the great thing about print, right, is everything is digital now, and we want it to be digital so we can see it on our phones and refer back to it, and it's not necessarily static the way print is. As soon as it's done, it's outdated. But a tangible item in your mailbox, it's not a bill or junk, that has your name on it or your kids' names on it or your friends' pictures. It's such a big deal.
That's true.
And this goes to a huge audience. It goes to all of our current families, faculty and staff, but it also goes to all of our alumni, former families, former faculty. And this particular issue is kind of reflecting on the past and teeing us up for our centennial. So there's all these different voices from the past kind of talking in their words that I think people were really excited about. And just the tone of this issue, particularly to get people excited about celebrating 100 years, kind of reconnecting to a school that maybe, if they're off in college, they're adults now and they don't live in the area, they're not necessarily thinking about it, but This has really helped re-engage a lot of folks.
I love it. I think re-engage is the key word there. When I asked my wife, I was like, what do you enjoy about this? She's like, I am so caught up in my day-to-day that for me, it's fun to get to see a recap of everything that happened over the year. I get to see what alumni are doing. I get to see what other classrooms outside of my little microcosm is doing. And I think that startups, businesses, entrepreneurs have a lot to learn from this because it's fun. It's like a yearbook, and you don't see this necessarily outside of schools and education. I think there's something here. I would love to see like a, Tech World annual magazine that got mailed, and it highlighted, maybe different companies in that community. It's a community building piece of content that works well. So I like it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's also, we design it to be evergreen. We don't really use it to promote things coming up necessarily in a way that is really time sensitive. We use it strategically, but it can be used for different audiences. So we use it with prospective families as well, so they can really get a snapshot of the school, know what they're getting, what they can expect, and they can look forward to.
Cool, right on. So my last question, I think, for this segment is, what's some valuable constructive feedback that maybe you've received when creating some emotionally evoking content?
So I thought about this one ahead of time, of course. And I think it's probably less direct feedback and more of just lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us marketers or just professionals in general, we like to plan, we like to know what we're doing and have a very concrete, specific vision. I know that's typically my MO. And I think that's really important to have everything planned ahead. But what I've learned, especially with storytelling, when you're telling other people's stories, is that you have to be a really, really good listener and maybe follow the story a little bit. So sometimes we've had a particular plan for an angle of a video or a profile or something. And as we're having those conversations with that first person, this actual storyteller, it's taken a different turn. So just planning ahead, but being flexible is really, really important. And the flip side of that is just to not just put somebody in front of a camera and ask them to tell a great story. I mean, there's
Which I'm doing to you today.
You gave me a little bit of homework I could use to prepare. Not a ton of time.
It's great advice, though. And it's something, as you were saying that, I was like having flashbacks to whether it was big research reports that we were trying to put out and gather all this data, and it ended up being so different than what we had initially intended. So the story's going to change, and having that flexibility and not being so rigid.
Yeah.
It has to come out this way. It's like,
right.
No.
And that's hard sometimes, depending on your personality type and, what your background is. So
that's true. So to wrap up this segment, I want to look at two different ads together that most people are familiar, if they're in marketing or not, about Microsoft versus Apple. And I think we'll get to see in these two examples the difference between what an emotional storytelling advertisement looks like versus one that maybe focuses more on the features, functionalities, cold, hard, surgical logic of an ad. So let's start with this one.
Today we have the Microsoft Surface Pro 7 and the MacBook Pro. The Surface comes with a pen and it is touchscreen. Mac gave it this little R, but why can't they just give me a whole touchscreen? The Surface Pro has a detachable keyboard. Now with the Mac, you're kind of just stuck with what you got. But with the Surface, yes, you can run your favorite apps on it. It has the power to run all your apps. It is a much better gaming device. I love my games. Then there's the price. Yeah.
All right, so that was the Microsoft ad. Before we jump into the Apple one, I saw this while watching Red Zone NFL on a Sunday, and I really liked it. And I sent it to my team, and they were like, no, this is exactly what we're not going to do, Travis. And when I read the comments as I was prepping for this podcast episode, the first few comments are like people being like, first of all, that kid is comparing a tablet to a laptop. Incorrect comparison, apples to oranges. And they just started like tearing apart this advertisement. And if you will watch this Apple one, but the comment section is so different. Perfect. So yeah, what are you seeing here between these two ads?
Well, I mean, first, I think typically the market leader doesn't put their competitor in their ad. So for Microsoft to put Apple's iPad in their ad, they're already, trying to make a comparison, which obviously the users or the commenters on this video understood that they weren't apples to apples to begin with. No pun intended. Yeah, I mean, I think the facts that the little guy was sharing with us in the Microsoft ad, those were really great. Kind of just benefits of the product, a lot of product benefits. But then the Apple ad is just so, I forgot what we were advertising, quite honestly. I mean, like, wow, that's awesome. It's a rocket ship. You're just kind of drawn into it a lot more. And it definitely evokes a lot more emotion. And, I think this is maybe less, I think we underestimate how many decisions are emotional versus rational.
The Apple ad is obviously aeronautic themed, right? We're seeing like a spaceship that, the Apple Pencil becomes a spaceship. We hear the noise and it's the toaster that pops up and it's on
It'll
liftoff.
transform your environment, change your life.
But one thing you just said that really stood out to me that I want to come back to is you forgot you were watching what you were watching. Like, we're like, oh yeah. And I had a guest on here a couple weeks ago who was like, the best marketing is when you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, it's so true. It's happening. And you're absolutely right. And I had a cringe moment because I just created a video of PandaDoc versus DocuSign. And now I don't think we're going to use it after hearing this, I'm going to argue we don't use it for any advertisements. It's okay if we have that content out there to help buyers make the decision. But yeah, it's kind of like, you're bringing up your competitor in the ad, it already shows that you're not the leader.
Yeah, you need both types of content. And I think it's different when it's like a tool like PandaDoc, some kind of tech tool. People are looking for those benefit comparisons. So don't throw the baby away with the bathwater. But I mean, we certainly wouldn't bring up our competitor schools in our ads, Yeah.
I love it. Let's switch gears. We'll go to our second segment of the show. How to build a team that creates emotional responses in your buyers. You've helped us understand what emotional content looks like. We saw the ads. We saw your award-winning content. Let's dive into what kind of teams make this stuff and how to assemble this, because this is where I think a lot of my marketing friends are really going to nerd out. I was thinking about my former bosses who are really into like, how do I create a dynamic team as a leader, as a marketing leader to do this. So do you mind just telling us a little bit briefly who's on your team? What kind of skill sets do they have? I know my wife talks about how much she loves your team and maybe some of the personality traits of why they make such great emotional content.
Well, I love my team too. They're amazing. We're a very small team. We're just a team of 3, which that includes myself. And I can't take full credit for my team because I inherited a member of it, and I don't know what I would do without her. Rafi Darrow is my right hand on our team. She's our web developer, communications manager. I mean, at independent schools like Shorecrest, I think people's titles don't belie, what they actually do or how valuable they are, for sure. But she has these hard skills and soft skills that are wonderful. She can code. She does our website, like things that a lot of people would have to outsource. She can do it herself. She's also a really strong writer and a great relationship builder.
Shout out to Rafi.
Yeah, love you, Rafi. And then John Hafer is our creative director, and he does everything from the big picture kind of strategy planning for photo shoots, video shoots, any kind of look and feel of campus, but then also that execution. He's an incredible graphic designer. And I think we all wear many hats together, and that's really important for lean teams, kind of being flexible and seeing when you need to lead and when you need to kind of follow and be the support person. And I think we're all willing to do that in different situations. But what's really best about them, and in terms of creating emotional content, back to your question, is that they're really good relationship builders, and they have a lot of conversations with I don't want to call them customers, our families aren't, I mean, I guess technically, anyway, with our families, with our students, with our teachers. We're not sitting at our desk kind of just banging things out that we think would be great, that follow this kind of marketing textbook checklist, but we're having the conversations, we're talking to the admissions team, what questions are you getting from prospective families? What have they shared that's really resonated? We're listening to our families of recent alumni, how well their kids are doing, how great, how prepared the kids felt going into college, and we're able to kind of just leverage those stories for our content. I think the other great thing is just the trust we have between the three of us and within other, colleagues, that we are willing to brainstorm together without being afraid of making a mistake or saying something stupid or silly. And so just that sounds so cliche, but trust and strong relationships, you got to have the skill first, of course. But I think people could have the same skills that these two have, but not have, they could have the hard skills that these two people have, but not have those same soft skills and not have that same trust and relationship building, and it wouldn't be the same team.
I love it. The part about relationship building was just stuck on loop as you were talking in my brain, and that is one of the most overlooked skill sets that I think marketers are like, I want to be the best. At PandaDoc, we have a team of 60 marketers, and when we were preparing for this episode, you and I were talking about it must be nice because you have so many people that are super specialized. I think one of the reasons I've thrived is I love to create relationships outside of my own team. And that helps fuel so much great emotional content that everyone really rallies behind. So I think that's a great piece of advice. I don't think it's fluffy, is having people on your team when you're interviewing them or you're coaching them or you're mentoring them, is to bring up some of those soft skills of relationship building outside the team. Go build a relationship with a teacher in a department who maybe isn't getting the highlights that they need and is doing amazing things that this community needs to know about.
Yeah.
That's really good advice. So what marketing areas do you outsource outside of your team, and maybe why your team chose to do that?
We outsource a fair amount. I think it's mostly, we're the marketing and communications team. So we do a lot more than just what we're talking about today. I mean, some things we can't outsource because it's more work it just needs to be done in-house. So a lot of our communications, writing the communications, supporting specific departments, that's all us. But photography, videography, some of the technical stuff we'll outsource, especially things like if we need any kind of animated logos or animated graphics, that kind of stuff. Some of our digital promotional stuff, like our Google AdWords, all that kind of thing, we just send it off to somebody else that can continually monitor and tweak and that kind of stuff. But we do a lot in-house. I'm really proud of what we're able to do with who we have. And we have some great partners that we work with as well.
Yeah. I mean, you said earlier you have over 1,000 students at your school. So that's 1,000 families. That's a pretty big customer list. And I know that with a team of 3, having been on one myself, it is a lot to handle. And one of the things that when we were working with agencies was that we tried working with some content agencies, and it was tricky for us, just like you said, because it was more work to work with them than it was to just do it ourselves in some cases. And I know that they struggled to really capture our voice and understand our audience. And that's where I think, again, this is why I asked the question. I think the folks that listen to this show need to, sometimes get some tips on how should I structure my team? What should I be looking for in my team? What can I hire agencies to do? We record this podcast with an amazing agency that we consider partners of ours. So there's some stuff that it makes sense to bring in-house. And again, going back to the relationship building, that's hard to outsource. It's impossible to outsource.
Absolutely. So. You mentioned voice, being the challenge with using external folks. And I think one thing that we're working on now is kind of a brand refresh. And so we do have external partners helping us gather data, helping us understand and unpack that data, and just kind of helping harvest the story from us. And one of our deliverables from that is going to be a brand voice guide. That's something that we haven't had. And as we've grown as a school, I mean, we're 100 years old. We have more students. We have more, staff, not in the marketing department necessarily, but if we can have that voice guide so we can use that when we're onboarding folks and when we do work with partners, I think that'll help us a lot. And that's something that we haven't had. I think a lot of businesses and organizations do. And we know it when we hear it or we see it, but we can't articulate it to someone else.
A lot of the audience for this podcast does not have a brand voice guide. So you are not alone. PandaDoc has almost 1,000 employees. We're just writing ours now.
Yeah.
So
okay.
don't
That's
put too much
great.
pressure on
Yeah.
yourself. And just to let you know. And when we do write ours, I'll be happy to share mine with you so you can
Yes.
nerd out on our structure and what we put in there. Looking ahead, how do you think teams like yours or other are going to evolve and become better storytellers? Is there a certain area that maybe you and your team are looking to expand, invest, and grow in the next few years?
We'd certainly like to use more kind of different channels to telling our story. Certainly video is huge. We want to do that more. I love that we're doing a podcast today. I think that's something we've been interested in as a school. Like, how can we explore that? Schools are typically a little bit slower to adopt these new technologies or channels for very, very good reasons that I don't necessarily have to get into right now. But I think for us, our biggest referral is word of mouth. That's how families find out about our school, and how to harness that in real ways, both online and through storytelling on campus.
Absolutely. I know that I'm working right now with some students over at USF who are trying to do a student-run podcast. I know that's something that you guys have talked about, so it could be a great opportunity for students to just learn about technology and get in there. You can get started relatively cheap. You don't have to have a big fancy studio like we do. We've been doing it for a year, and so it comes with the territory, but this has been great. Let's wrap it up. Let's play a fun game, and if you're down, let's play Are You In or Are You Out?
Okay.
You ready
I'm
for
in.
this?
Yeah, let's do it.
I've got my whiteboard here for you.
Okay.
And you can go ahead and write the numbers 1 through 5. And then I will read some statements. And you will write if you are in or you are out.
Okay.
And if you feel so compelled, you can tell me to screw off. I don't want to answer your question, Travis. Or you can just say I'm in and that's it. All right.
Okay.
My first one for you, Rachel, is number 1. Funny content is better than heartwarming content. Are you in or are you out? Funny content is better than heartwarming content. All right. Number 2. Authenticity is the best way to tap into emotion. Are you in or are you out? And then number 3, it's easier to advertise for a nonprofit than a for-profit organization. It's easier to advertise for a nonprofit than a for-profit org. Number 4, it's best to showcase success stories rather than promote authentic struggles. It's best to showcase success stories rather than promote authentic struggles. Number 5, Shorecrest is the best independent school in the state of Florida. I don't know how that one got in there. All right. Number 1, funny content is better than heartwarming content. Go ahead and show the audience through the camera here what you put in for number 1. You said out. Okay. Out. Do you feel strongly about that one?
This line of questioning is very challenging for me. Nothing is a black and white yes or no answer. I think if I had to choose one, I would choose heartwarming over funny.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's your line of work. I get
absolutely.
it.
I think funny is great. I love funny. Funny can sometimes get mean depending on who it is.
And I think it goes back to what you said earlier, mission driven. I don't know if the word funny is in the values and core values of mission of educating children at an independent school. So fair enough. Number 2, authenticity is the best way to tap into emotion.
Yeah,
You wrote
totally in.
Okay. Number 3, it's easier to advertise for a nonprofit than a for-profit org. You wrote define easy.
I'm sorry. I can't answer that. That's too loaded of a question. I don't want to start a fight.
Fair enough. I would say that every for-profit org would say it's not easy, and every nonprofit org would also say it's not easy. So.
Right, exactly. It's equally difficult.
We'll throw the question out.
Okay.
Number 4, it's best to showcase success stories rather than promote authentic struggles.
That's a really tough one. I think that's really tough because sometimes the struggle is the success story. They're not mutually exclusive.
It's like going back to the TikTok of the Pixar tip, right?
Right, yeah.
There has to be some
Yeah.
struggle, and then we come out on
Exactly,
the success on top.
exactly.
And then lastly, Shorecrest is the best independent school in the state of Florida.
Totally in on that.
Totally in.
Yeah.
If folks want to connect with you, they can reach you on LinkedIn, Rachel Barrett. They can also go to Shorecrest's website And they'll see tons of student-generated content and community-generated content on your social media, which we didn't get into, but that's a great part of storytelling,
Absolutely.
too.
Yes. Yeah, we'd love to connect.
So thanks so much for coming on the show, Rachel.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Engagement Lab, brought to you by PandaDoc. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you and what you think of the show.